Oromo Voice Radio English program. Oromo Voice Radio is broadcasting to Oromia at 16-meter band or 17,850 kilohertz or on oromovoice.org website. OVR broadcasts Oromia Insight program every Monday for 15 minutes at 7:15 p.m. Oromia local time. Welcome to Oromia Insight program.
Welcome to Oromia Insight. My name is Ali Galato. On 16 April 2016, Oromia Support Group Australia have organized Human Rights Forum, the quest for freedom toward sustainable just peace through human rights. There are many speakers on the day from different communities like Gambella, Benishangul, Ogaden, many others from Oromo community as well. Dr. Trevor, Trueman, founder of Oromia Supported Group, was present. Today I will present to you Dr. Trevor Trueman's speech.
Well, I must say, this is amazing. First of all, I would like to say a huge thank you to OSG Australia for this event and for inviting me to Australia to be with you here. And I must say hearty congratulations to the Oromo in Australia. It's a great moment in a man's life when he looks upon one of his children and that child is bigger and more effective than he is. So thank you, OSG Australia. This afternoon I felt really quite frightened at times and daunted by all these faces and names that I've had contact with or contact from in America, Israel, Djibouti, Somaliland, Kenya and Egypt. It's really quite frightening to see all the people that have expressed their affection to me, and thank you very much. It is quite overwhelming. Now to the serious bit. There is not one person living who has enjoyed equality, justice and respect for human rights within Ethiopia. For a brief period in 1991, I was really hopeful that things were going to change for the better. And I was reminded just yesterday, a telephone call with one of the health workers that I had the privilege to work with between 1988 and 1991. And he reminded me of his experience in Didesa camp in 1992-93, when he wrote some years ago saying how he couldn't get rid of the image from his mind of seeing two of the health workers that we had worked with at the bottom of a hole where they'd been thrown after they'd been killed in Didesa. Over the last, between 2010 and 2013, I interviewed 187 refugees in Kenya, Djibouti, Somaliland, South Africa and Egypt. 50% of the people that I'd interviewed have been tortured. Now, most refugee populations, according to literature surveys, include between 5 and 35% people with a history of torture. So 50% is a really high figure. In fact, if you just examine the men that I interviewed, 3/4 of them had been tortured. If you ask the ones who'd been in detention, about 90% of men who had been detained in Ethiopia had been tortured. Of the women who'd been detained, about half of them had been tortured, but a separate 50%, overlapping, had been raped in detention. These are indeed absolutely alarming statistics, and they put Ethiopia in the top division of human rights abuses, not only in Africa but in the whole world. The Oromo Support Group has now reported over 5,000 extrajudicial killings. And this does not include the 147 students killed in 2014, and it does not include the 500 or so who've been killed in their homes and on the streets in the protests since November 2015. As you know, martial law has been established in Oromia for the first time since 1992. It's very difficult to get news out of Ethiopia now. I was speaking to Felix Horn, the researcher for Human Rights Watch, just last weekend, and he was bemoaning the fact that it's very difficult to get verifiable information out from Ethiopia because it's so difficult to get more than one account of the same incident. He'd been interviewing students fleeing from the current protests in northern Kenya, and he was saying that people were being captured by the Kenyan police and sent back to Ethiopia because they were paying money to the Kenyan police to do that for them. All these abuses, we'll talk about detention for a second. Tens of thousands who were detained at present, now it's under martial law, is a similar figure to the numbers that were detained in 1992 and 1993. The breakthrough Amnesty International report in October 2014, Because I Am Oromo, reported that there have been 5,000 detentions, at least it said, between 2011 and 2014. This is a laughably small number. And one TPLF official, having read that report, said, 5,000? I've detained that many in one weekend. The result of these abuses is that we now have over 100,000 Oromo refugees in Africa and possibly 250,000 Oromo refugees elsewhere on the planet. This is 250,000 plus people whose lives have been thwarted, ruined, dislocated, and possibly irrecoverably. And why is the Ethiopian government able to do this? It's because of our taxes. The taxes I pay in the UK, the taxes you pay in Australia, the taxes that the citizens of the United States pay. Because it is supported by foreign governments. Between 1.25% of Ethiopia's budget, depending on which reference you use, comes from foreign aid. Without foreign aid, that regime could not exist. Between 10 and 20 million are now food insecure in Ethiopia. Back in 1961, I think it was, an economist intellectual in Britain, I can't remember whether he was in Cambridge or Oxford University, Amartya Sen, he said that famine does not occur in a functioning democracy. We had the famine in 1984-85, and since then, since 1991 basically, there's barely been a year gone past, certainly no more than 3 or 4 years, without the Ethiopian government holding out its hands and saying we need help because we have starving people in my country. People who are short of food despite the fact that some of the richest agricultural areas have been handed over at a very cheap price to foreign investors, a lot of which have been used to grow food for export. And how obscene to have people short of food in your country when you're exporting food. This reminds me of the Derg days, yeah? And in this time, Ethiopia has built up one of the biggest and best equipped armies in Africa. It's developed probably the best security system in the whole of Africa, all on the basis of foreign aid. In terms of combating this, I would like to echo what Bichok and Sergei and Hassan Nur said earlier, that we really have to connect to others. Cooperation is absolutely essential in terms of lobbying governments, NGOs and UNHCR to counter the lobbying done by the TPLF. The TPLF spend hundreds of millions of dollars every year on lobbying all governments. Whenever there's a negative bit of news about the EPRDF, It's followed up by press releases and visits to ambassadors by the Ethiopian government and its embassies. At present, the cooperation that we enjoy, especially with the people in the south of Ethiopia, is not inclusive of all groups in Ethiopia. It's difficult to accept the argument of equality with former oppressors, but no less, this is essential. I was speaking to Andargachu Tsige's wife in the UK just a couple of weeks ago, and I'm proud to say that she demonstrated alongside Oromo in London against the killing of student protesters in Oromia region. I'm not so proud to say that she wasn't really welcomed by some of the Oromo demonstrators in London. Without cooperation amongst all of the opposition groups in Ethiopia, the West will continue to support the current regime. They are looking for a credible alternative. As long as people are divided, as long as they're not cooperating with each other, there will be no credible alternative for the international community, for which read the USA and Britain, to support. In addition, without dialogue and cooperation with all the peoples in Ethiopia, when the TPLF fall, as inevitably they will, when they do fall, there will be a power vacuum left. And we've seen what happened in Libya, we've seen what happened in the 1990s in Yugoslavia, and we've seen what happened in Somalia. And we may even see reflections of what happened in Rwanda if we do not have some sort of dialogue and cooperation between all of the peoples of Ethiopia. In addition, development in Ethiopia will be held back without the cooperation of all the groups in Ethiopia. An economist from Zambia, I believe, called Dembisa Moyo, wrote an African proverb in the fly of her book, and it said the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time is now. And that's the same with cooperation and dialogue with other groups. We must begin by socializing and developing trust with people and agreeing a common front on which to campaign, and that common front, which is easily backed, is human rights. Without stability in Ethiopia, there will be no stability in the Horn of Africa. Without human rights and without equality and justice for the Oromo, there will be no stability in Ethiopia. Human rights activism, not only in terms of Ethiopia, but across the board, activists are continually pushing the envelope. That means that you're surrounded by obstacles, by delays, by frustrations. So wherever you look, there is stuff that you're fighting against, you're pushing against. And you tend to think, oh, this is impossible. Everywhere I look are problems. Now, I don't say that we should dwell in the past, but we should look back at it and see how far we have come over the last 30 years. And it is encouraging to some extent. There is now a region called Oromia. Could you imagine that in the 70s? The language of education in Oromia region schools, in primary schools, is Afan Oromo. Could you imagine that in the 1970s? And, right, as I say, at times I have got depressed and fed up, and people have said that I've always been cheerful and kept going and what. No, it's not true. Frequently I put my head in my hands and think, I don't know what the hell to do next. And there are a couple of problems that I'm dealing with at the moment that I don't really know how to approach. It's not easy, and I'm not always positive and cheerful. But looking out here and the people I see now, I am tremendously encouraged. I'm so impressed with the organisation, the enthusiasm, the expertise and the commitment of the people in this room. So give yourselves a big So in summary, go forward with confidence, but with consideration for others, and be inclusive, especially those with whom this is most difficult. And remember what Mahatma Gandhi said. Mahatma Gandhi, I believe, is a hero of Bekele Garba. He quoted one thing from Mahatma Gandhi in his speech at the OSA conference last year. Another thing that Gandhi said, and I'll leave you with this, is first, they ignore us. Then, they laugh at us. Then, they beat us. Then, we win. Singalate Fota.